So lots of things to challenge us. Hi, David. I'm Mr. Gorringe. KM, I don't know who KM is. Do you know who KM is, Peter?
No, I don't.
Hi, KM.
Hello,
Ah,
I'm Katie. I haven't
okay.
been on for a while, but I'm
Yeah,
back,
it's
so.
just the letters make it hard to know who you are, you see.
All good. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, fun night tonight. Really busy. Mr. Hannigan, how are you? Yeah, mic's off, but that's okay. I heard you say, I'm good, thank you, as I saw the mouth move. One of the joys of getting older is you get better at lip reading. As your hearing goes, your sight goes, everything else goes. Yeah.
How's things been with you? Busy?
Busy. Fortunately, June is a quiet month for me because we end of financial year and all those things. We have other priorities. So I was lucky enough to be able to take a week off. I'm trying to do that every month. That's my retirement plan. One day a week off, 1 week a month off, 1 month a year off. So a month a year is a little harder. I grind on that one.
Yeah. How far away is that plan?
Oh, it's now. So I decided to commit to that beginning of last year. I'm hitting about a 50% hit on the 1 week month off. Chris, who's online, Chris Gorringe, will tell you that I'm not perfect at taking time off. You just get so used to it.
Yeah.
A few years back, we took, or the whole family went to Fiji to celebrate Gwen's 70th birthday, and we got over there and said, "Oh, you're just miserable. You know, we don't want to be around." And then the local Fijians started to remove a tree in the resort, and I could see that they were going to hit the roof if they weren't careful. So we went through and gave them a lesson in rigging and how to climb. And so
you got your dose for the day.
And everyone said that was it. You know, it was the change that I needed. I don't do well just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and it'll help for some of you listening to understand it whilst we're waiting for Andy's not on yet, is he, Peter?
I just spoke to him. He's having trouble with
the
link, so
that's fine.
send him the link again.
Can you let me know when he is on, and I'll yield to him.
Yeah.
So yes, look, one of the generalizations that helps you when you're dealing with arborists is most arborists that have done trade work have ADHD. The reason they do tree work, David, you're laughing because you know I'm right. So the reason we're like that is we could be landscapers, except being on the same site for 3 days in a row would be unacceptable. So you have people that are ADHD. Second thing is we're egotists, and we're not egotists in the bad sense of the word, but we're egotists in that we have to make decisions about what we're going to do in terms of rigging and cutting that have the impact to affect our lives. So if we were hesitant, we wouldn't. The fact that we proceed means that often we've got a lot more self-confidence than perhaps might be justified by the average person. So you tend to get this persona of arborists being, very hardworking, constantly doing things. Now, that's a big generalization. That's looking at the climbers and those that are doing that sort of work. Elevated work platform operators obviously don't fit in the same category. Although they're working near electrical wires, they're rule followers. They're the guys that like to keep to it. But if you talk about your average climber, like you were, Peter, I'm guessing you're not quite comfortable doing a job that takes 4 days.
No, we laugh about that, how builders can be on a site for 18 months. We go stir crazy.
Yeah. And so as a good set of generalizations, that'll help you when you're dealing with other people from the industry. If they've come from a climbing background, be prepared for them to be overly self-assured. They had to be. Otherwise, they're going to go and lose money. They're going to be unprofitable. They're going to be out. And I say it with all due respects, being able to handle a bit of chaos. I have a son that loves chaos, and I have a son that despises it. He wouldn't come here without having his hair brushed. Everything would have been right. And he worked as a tree guy for about 18 months. And the one thing that he couldn't handle was the disorder.
Yeah.
You know, there's stuff on the ground and it's just not coming down evenly, and it's not evenly stacked. And that was it. He said, I just can't handle, the ropes aren't beautifully rolled up and laid out there, you know. And of course, if you work at that level, the chances are, again, you're going to go broke. Okay,
Yeah,
well, I've got to.
We had a fabulous guy working for us, and he left to become a greenkeeper because he wanted everything to be as perfect as he could get it, and he loves it.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. So a personality type somewhat selects us because of those characteristics. And sometimes they can be difficult as you go from climbing into consulting, because sometimes you can be seen to be a little bit rash, a little bit self-assured, and that's got good and bad with it. The good is nothing as convincing as a person who believes what they believe, but it's also bad in that, you know, you can fall into this Dunning-Kruger effect of thinking that you know a lot more than you know. And so that's a difficult one, and trying to figure out how to balance that, but also being aware of that, Peter, from your side in how you communicate. And I think we discussed this in class on a few occasions, that, you know, phrases like in fact and actually, and they're that beat you up, you know, I'm saying I'm right, rather than the more gentler option is, it has been my long held opinion that, or my understanding is that. And I still write a little bit sledgehammerish, and the team regularly have to change and tone down for me. And even then I still get into trouble. There are still people who are far more gentle in communicating than I am.
Mark, it looks like Andy's made it.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I'll yield to you to handle the transition, Peter.
So can you hear me, Andy? Oh, there he is. Yep.
I can, Peter.
Yep, great. So Andy's going to tell us a little bit about a planting device mechanism that we're currently using in Byron Shire at the moment. So tell us all about it.
Okay, this will just take a second to come up. I've found some experience, but in Bangalore, which is one of the towns of Byron Shire, we have had a decision, partly guided by the public, to change some of the trees that feature in the main street. Right. Can you see that now?
You're not sharing your with us, Andy.
When you click the screen, Andy, you've got to say share, and then click the screen you want to share, and then share again.
So slide one, as I explained, that the tree. Okay, so these liquid ambers, Peter is familiar with them as well, but they were sort of pushing up this asphalt pavement surface foundations.
So is there any way you can turn your camera off?
Things weren't getting any better. So with the blessing of our council, and all right, so hopefully you can see the slide of the two liquid ambers, and then after they've been cut down, they're in these planter boxes, and you can see around their bases all the cracking of the asphalt that was resulting, causing the trip hazards. Interesting to note on that, one of them you can see a bit of a document, which when I saw that originally, I thought it was someone protesting about the removal of trees, but it ended up being a local artist that was saying, "Oh, don't take it out yet. I'm making a lithograph of the lines in the tree," which we allowed him to do. So he was quite happy about that. But we had a lot of support. So we decided to use, we didn't want this to happen again. So we thought, right, let's bite the bullet and try to do the job so that it'll last at least 30 or 40 years before we have to do anything to it again. So we decided to use Strata Vault, removed the trees and dug out their root system with stumps and excavated 40 cubic metres of soil. In the second photo, the part of this process is we line the hole with geotextile and an aggregate with drainage. And then we start installing the structures of the Strata Vault. So this is the system being installed here, the Strata Vault system. So it's a load-bearing matrix, which will mean that when we fill that with soil, not only we can plant trees in it that won't suffer any compaction of the soil and the root system, but we can feed services through this if we want to, or existing services we can build around it, and we'll be able to seal over the top of this ultimately to a point where even if a truck drives over that, it won't fail, and it won't impact the soil and the root system. So the middle photo here just shows where we've led agriculture pipe through there, ag drainage pipe, and that serves two purposes. Some of those come to the surface and act almost like snorkels, so that we are passing air through the whole system, but also importantly for irrigation, we can water through these pipes, which will go around in a circle and leak water out and into the soil. The third photo there is the tree that we've selected to be planted. It's Buckinghamia. There'll be two of those planted in this situation. And we've sourced them from a local nursery. And before picking them up, we've noted the north on the bag, just so that when they planted, they go in at the same orientation, and which I believe might reduce the sunburn effect. Next photo shows we've progressed a bit. We've started filling the cells with our soil mix that we had specially made for us. Typically in these situations, structural soil is called for, and there are some interesting papers out of the US about the formula of that mix for that. They're usually highly mineral based, very little organic matter. In some cases, like water crystals mixed in with them. We had a local supplier that was got a very large composting industry, but he also has a pretty good soil science background. And we talked to him a lot and came up with this mineral-based soil. And we added into that biochar, which we thought would have a couple of good benefits. That, like charcoal has an ability to remove toxins in the human body at least, and used in aquariums and so on to reduce toxins. And so as a long-term slow release fertilizer, we believe it has benefits in this soil mix. The trees were brought in, they're planted in that same orientation as when they left the nursery. And then so we're getting set up there now. So the whole thing has been filled with this structural mix. We've got a bit of a gap there between the cell and we'll backfill that with a coarser mix, which will just sort of air prune any roots that may come out before they encounter a root barrier. And you can see here the capping has been put on the cells, which is part of the structural loading of the system. That's a little bit further along, so everything's all sealed up. We've just boxed around those trees temporarily before we actually pour concrete. And yeah, that may sound quite alarming, like there are options, you know, to pave around this, or to use permeable paving or permeable asphalt. But we think that, given the experience with the previous trees that were in a completely closed system, that these will do okay from the surrounding areas where there's a lot of turf around the back of this. And we have a diversion we've put into the gutter, which will actually capture any water that flows through or down the gutter and divert it through that leaky ag pipe, and help with the irrigation and the aeration. So that particular project, we should have that sealed by tomorrow. We've had a style guide for Bangalore that we've got to adhere to, so we're using exposed aggregate pavement. These are the next trees that we have to address, which are the leopard trees. And you can see there the state of the pavement, which they were never planted well. They were just basically, you know, a couple of buckets full of soil dug out of the pavement, it looks like, and trees shoved in there and left to work themselves out. But terrible buckling of this pavement. Like, I went there one day after some complaints, and it looked like there was a young dolphin trapped under the pavement. When we dug it up, this is what we found, all these surface roots. This schematic here, it just shows how this Strata Vault works. So those stages I described to you before of the aggregate drainage base, and then the components stacked on top of each other. You can see there, and then it's been paved over. So load-bearing roots have got no compaction, so they can move through freely through the whole matrix. And it's interesting, like as I said, I've had a bit of experience with this on a small scale in some car parks in Byron, and the trees have done very well. When I was visiting Sydney recently, I was walking around Barangaroo and could see lots and lots of trees planted in pavement. And when I investigated it further, they were using a very similar system, but you know, which just allows you to have this small void around the tree. But you know, you can service it, I suppose, by lifting up these. I did see one or two dead trees, but you can put any number of things into the matrix, including water moisture sensors, so you can monitor it all. You can have that sending signals to your phone telling you how that's going, and you can irrigate through it. And these are sort of almost suspended in the, yeah, or some of them were suspended in a pier. This is another example here of you know, many trees that they've planted in Barangaroo, and most of them doing quite well. So just at the bottom there, I've got a little diagram of Simon Leake's soil mix that he devised for Barangaroo. He's a very well-known soil scientist that used to work at Ryde School of Horticulture, and this soil mix was used for these plantings, but also on Barangaroo, on the headlands and so on itself, a lot of which are artificial. And this is another place where I've seen this system used, was up in Caloundra. And this is actually promotional material from Strata Vault that I've witnessed it myself. My son lives up there. And yeah, 2 trees of the same species and planted at the same time. One of them was just put into the structural soil, limited space, maybe 6 cubic meters, so generous. That the other one would have received the full treatment. So it appears as though it's an expensive process to do this. What we've spent at Bangalore so far is over $40,000. But when we try to measure the longevity of the situation without any further intervention, plus the benefits of having shade and a healthy tree, we figure it's worth it. And that's pretty much it.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's great, Andy. Thank
So,
you.
I'm happy to answer questions if you like.
So questions for Andy?
So you're harvesting small amounts of rainwater that are coming down the gutters and
Yeah.
piping them into the system. What about when we get a lot of rain? Is there any possibility that the whole thing will just fill up with water?
I doubt it, because it's not. There's a lot of like Bangalore does flood, but it gets away quite quickly, and the soil, the present soil bit, is quite open, and it just seems to get away without pooling really. So I'm prepared to sort of make a bet on it. Really.
Yeah, well, you've shown examples of it where it's worked, so I imagine it does actually work. But I was just interested in what you had to say about that.
Yeah, well, you can plug it into your stormwater system, and we couldn't really do that without going uphill again. So,
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Andy. We might move on to some stuff Mark's got to talk about.
Can I just ask one question about the Strata Vault?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you do, I'm doing a job at the moment that they've recommended permeable paving over tree roots and ABRI system, and I've read all about it, but I know I've spoken to installers. They said you've got to excavate, then you've got to put compacted gravel, blah, blah, blah. Can you do a shallow version of the Strata Vault system under permeable paving?
No. And the bottom answer, and I'll say it 100 times, I know you may have been taught otherwise, but the appropriate material over existing tree roots is concrete.
Yeah, I've tried that, but
concrete porous.
But what they're saying is they need the permeable paving to get their landscape percentage across the line. That's what they're telling me.
Okay, perforate the concrete or use porous concrete. So it's a. I'm trying to think. I think it's called a low fines concrete, but there is a porous concrete that'll allow it to fill up, charge into the surface below, and also the pourable aggregates. So pourable aggregates are things like your polymer bonding glues and pebble, and they both allow for high percolation rates. Remembering that the only time you don't get that sort of level in, and I can demonstrate this for you, and I'll pull up to share my screen, entire screen. Concrete's interesting stuff, and Peter will be able to verify, or Sean, who's on the line, will be able to verify, or even Peter Hannigan. I've got a lot of concrete. It's unfortunately a evil of where I am. Photos, this just illustrates it really well, and I only took the shot a couple of days ago. This is outside my office. Here is wet concrete and dry concrete. Can you see that there?
Yep.
Yep.
And in fact, what you're seeing is exactly the opposite. This here is porous. So this whole slab here was built out of overruns. So when the concrete truck hasn't used all the concrete up, they need somewhere to get rid of it. We purchased it at a reduced rate and used the overrun concrete. And so these are poolcrete.
I reckon well.
And the water won't go through the poolcrete anywhere near as well. It's a lot higher cement load, and therefore the water doesn't go through. Here the water goes through, so it's actually quite moist underneath the average concrete. The problem with that concrete there is it won't let through at the rate that rain falls, so it runs off, and we know it runs off. You know, we get more than about 1 millimetre in an hour, and it will run off. So that's where these porous concretes come in. They allow for high volumes of water to go through. Or the polymer aggregates, they'll do the same thing, and they'll allow it to go through. At the end of all of that, you still have to drain it somewhere, Vicky, because what you've created is a dam. It's a dam where about, depending on what system you're using, about 30% of your volume of your hard surface is spaces. So if you've got a 10 cubic metre driveway slab down, that will let that through, and you've still got the soil below that'll take in water. So at 1 millimetre an hour, you won't see it. At 5 millimetres an hour, you'll start to potentially have some runoff, just like you will with soil generally.
Yeah, they've got a gradient, like with paving, 1 in 10 minimum. So they've got a gradient, but the concrete wouldn't allow them to calculate that driveway, the very large driveway, as landscape area.
Yeah, they should do. I mean, they're just going to have to change their material, but you can see, and I'll just pull it up now, porous concrete is becoming really commonplace. Again, they would rather it drain somewhere, but if you've got a slope away, you can do it. So this is the sort of thing we're talking about. That's a reasonable porosity. And as I said, it's not just concrete. Same with the bonded aggregate. Porous bonded aggregate.
Yeah.
And you see that used around tree pits in all sorts of places. So it's this sort of looking material. It's just an aggregate, a rounded aggregate usually, with a polymer glue that joins together. It's actually an Australian invention. Both of those really do have good capacity to both store and slow runoff, because the runoff still requires movement down through that gradient. So hydraulic engineer or your civil soil engineer should be able to calculate that into the open surface area proportionally. It's reduced, but it's still fairly good.
Okay.
Okay, but the existing tree roots are the problem. Always will be. Okay, I'm going to start with one that Peter hasn't seen yet, but I got to see, and I thought it was a fascinating one. Photo sets from others. Must be going blind. Photo sets from others. And let's have a look. Sean Talent, Hawkesbury. Okay, Sean called me and he said, look, I've got this unusual set of growths occurring on the trees. We've got dead tips on the edge. So first thing he's worried about, dieback within the trees, they're all araucarias, and then these big thumping lumpy growths. I don't know whether you can see it there at all. Is that coming through, guys?
Yeah.
Yep, great.
Yeah, it's not huge, but we can see it.
I'll go in and zoom in for you on some of those features then. That's fine.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
these weird looking lumpy growths on it, some dead tissue. Really unusual. Just notice that there's a leaf associated with each of these. So that's a part of what we went through in the diagnostic process. Again, you'll see where the leaf end's broken off here, here, here. You'll see the leaf is still attached there. Really weird looking thing. So how do we diagnose this? Any hints or ideas?
I'm thinking either fasciation or a gall former.
So gall forming insect, yeah, that was my first one. How would we determine whether that was the case or not? Peter, I assume that was Peter Hannigan.
No, that was Andy, but I was thinking you dissect the growth.
Andy, sorry, thanks, Andy. How would we confirm whether it's a gall forming insect or not? That
You just cut it open, dissect it.
Yeah, dissect it. If you've got an insect, you're going to find some form of hole or hollow in the middle, and usually some form of larvae in the middle. And so that was the first thing I did. And just annoyingly, there was nothing on the inside. I cut it into very thin strips. And in the process of cutting it, I realized that it wasn't very woody. In fact, under quick examination, I was able to determine using a microscope that it was all bark. So those burls are all bark burls, all bark swellings. So that's the first thing. And I'll head over to those now so you can see what they look like. So next thought, what do we do? Now, this is the stuff that we get stuck with as diagnosticians all the time, something really weird. What are you thinking? If it's not an insect, what else could form a gall?
Fungi?
Fungal or fascination?
Fungi. Yeah, fungi and microorganisms. So there's some bacteria that will form galls. So you get a fungi that attacks apples and regularly forms galls. So could it be either of those two? And that was, I gave that some thought, and I did some searches on the internet for fungi or bacteria that produce galls on Araucariaceae. Remember, we've got agathis, we've got Araucaria. Both of them are being affected. And my diagnostician on site, Sean, said, I didn't see the other trees. The other trees weren't reacting. And so that was a difficult one for me. So I need to figure out how I'm going to deal with that. Again, sorry, I just got to go back a few days to have a look at where we, oh no, I can't. It's in microscope shots. Yeah. So again, this is some close-ups. I'll enlarge them for you. I'm looking for mites. Mites can form galls. And in fact, I did find some mites, but the sort of mites that usually form galls are called eriophyid mites. And they're long bodies, and they've only got 6 legs rather than 8 legs. So didn't see any eriophyid mites. There's certainly some mite activity there, but I think that's more mite activity because we've created a nice environment. And as I said, look through cross sections. The cross sections gave us the ability, and I don't think you can see it overly well in these shots, but they indeed were all just simple cells, so parenchyma cells. This is probably the best one. You can see these nice big cells. These are cells. The word cell was actually first used to describe the holes observed in cork. So That is indeed just all bark that we're looking at. So that was the stage where I'm beginning to get frustrated. I don't know what I'm doing. So then I wanted to look to see if I could find anything more. And my comment to Sean was, I think we've got oxen mimica. That is, I think we've got a chemical spillage or a chemical damage. And if you look here, this is what herbicide damage looks on some species of conifers. And there's a good reason for it. One of these chemicals would normally cause the leaf to subside, and the typical one that we most commonly see used is 2,4,5-T, 2,4-D, or dicamba. And dicamba does exactly this. You can see the needle is stuck in the swollen, corky mass around the outside. The reason it's like that, I suspect, I'm not a biochemist looking at it, but the logical conclusion is there is no abscission zone on a pine. There's no abscission zone on an Araucaria. There is on, say, eucalyptus, so the eucalyptus leaves would thin out. In the case of the Araucariaceae, they can't thin out. The corky material gets this influx of chemical, and the chemical causes the unusual and rapid division of the bark at the zone of abscission or around that zone of abscission. So what we are looking at is, in fact, that exact process. Does that make sense for you?
Very good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Sean, you online still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Does that fit in with what your end results were? Have you spoken to anyone to find out whether that whether the use of herbicide?
Still waiting for a reply, but I know the garden pretty well, and I remember there being quite a heavy weed set throughout that mulch garden bed a few months ago when I first noticed the symptoms. So it correlates time-wise. So be surprised if that's not the answer.
Yeah, so just a really weird response. I have never seen it before. But it was the logical process. So it's going through and saying what is most likely. We knew it was an insect. We could get rid of that. We could look at it and say it didn't seem to be fungal or bacterial. May have had to go get some more pathology done to determine that on a broad range of species, but not affecting other trees. That started to suggest that we had something that was abiotic, that is not living. So biotics tend to be more specific. And the fact that one group was being affected was the problem. Sean raised that with me, and I said, I think I know what it is. You're not getting leaf abscission. So if that was dicamba spray, for example, around eucalyptus, the leaves, I think, Peter, you went out to a site and looked at the leaves had been shed off the trees at the Penrith. I don't know whether you came out on that one and looked at it. But dicamba regularly causes problems. Every November, it's a great little money earner. People will call me up and say, I don't know what's wrong with my trees. It's all of a sudden started to thin and shed. And you say to them, have you used a Vindii treatment on your lawn or a weed and feed on your lawn? They say, yes. You say, okay. Soil's dry, you put it on, it's highly mobile. That is, it's not held in place. You add a dry period, then you add water, rainfall, and it washes it down to the roots. And the instructions say, do not apply around trees, do not apply on roots, but people don't think about the roots extending in under the lawn area where they're watering and irrigating every week. So they have this dry condition followed by rain, just so frequent. I do 3 or 4 every single year where somebody's accidentally poisoned their trees. So in fact, I did one this year where a paid horticulturalist came in, and you could see the damage even on the lawn because it over applied at the lawn level. And I'm sitting there, they were used it on buffalo. Buffaloes are very sensitive grass to the standard weed and feed chemical. So you have to get one specifically for buffalo. And the gardener that came in had clearly no idea that that was the case. So yeah, a really unusual one, and great. Thanks for sending it in, Sean.
Pleasure.
Appreciated that. Certainly tested my brain for about 3 hours one afternoon.
I was happy to give up.
If we've got a new disease, but it's this process of elimination, broad range of trees. So it's not just one species, no insect present, no obvious fungus present. And fungi, I don't know whether I can find a pycnidia for you. I should be able to find a picture of a pycnidia for you. Fungi with a microscope, you can see their fruiting bodies fairly well. Pycnidia spores, pycnidium images. So you can see these little structures on the surface of your plant when you look up close. So there's none of those sort of typical giveaways. So nothing there to suggest that you had fungus. As said, bacteria was a possibility, but it would have been something, hopefully, that we would have been alerted that there was this major disease with Araucarias. Once that's eliminated, then we're looking for a chemical or some other abiotic. In this case, it's clearly not things like lightning strike or gas or anything like that. It's something that's affecting the plant hormonally. So your hormonal based or your hormonal emulating herbicides are the ones that you start to look towards. So good one. Next one. Got a whole pile of email send-ins. And I'll go through those from the bottom up. This one's Peter Hannigan one. Come on, open up. Yeah, there we are. This, for those of you who haven't seen it, is the lesser coconut weevil. Now, lesser coconut weevil has been in Australia for quite a number of years, and it was confined to Queensland. It's a tropical or subtropical insect until about 6 or 7 years ago when we found it in the Botanic Gardens. And to date, the consequences in Sydney region haven't been as bad. There's going to be a range, but by the time you get to Queensland, this can actually lead to complete failure of the stem. The weevil gets in and goes down and causes issues. You can see Peter here. It's not a perfect image, but you can see that he's gone down, found the weevil, long snout. So weevils sometimes called snout beetles. Their nice little scientific group is Kerkleonidae, and they make round holes. So round holes are a good indication that you might have weevils. So the question is treatments. And the problem, Peter, is you live in New South Wales, and so you have a whole pile of nasty restrictions in how you get to deal with them. Imidacloprid is effective. So imidacloprid, only that group, the neonicotinoids, there's been some new neonicotinoids come out recently that have a far lower problems with off-label insects, mostly bees. But we are one of the largest users of imidacloprid per capita in the world, if not the largest. And we don't have a major problem with colony collapse decline of bees. Do not use it during flowering season if it's a male palm. Weevils are responsible for it, but you tend not to get bees on palms, male phoenix. So, and the beetles that are there, if you get rid of them, that's fine. They're not an issue. That's what's being used, and I'll send you on to another mentor who's not on here very often. I don't think he's been on here for a long time. Adam Tom in Queensland. You can get him at the Tree Doctor in Brisbane. Beg and plead and say to him, tell us your results and how you've been going. They've been doing really well with it. The dilemma is in New South Wales, you need an off-label permit.
Yeah. My query was with the trapping, whether you've used the pheromone baits at all. Had any experience with those?
As best as I know, Peter, they're not doing anything other than chemical treatment. But they may have coming up with a pheromone requires a pest that's causing lots of problems, and there are problems of true date palms, Phoenix dactylifera, that are far greater from an economic point of view. Rhinoceros beetle, a large one, a palm weevil, that are really destructive compared with this fellow.
I think most of the pheromone baits are based on that rhinoceros beetle. There is a fact sheet attached there because it had one of the baits in there, but it doesn't seem to exist anywhere other than in that brochure. There's similar ones around, but as you just mentioned, they're more about for the rhinoceros beetle.
Yeah.
There is also on that list down there a chemical that did seem to be able to use in New South Wales, that bottom one. I didn't fully research it, but I was wondering if
it's one of the neonicotinoids again. And has it got a label for use on palms or ornamentals?
I think it does. I ran out of time to look it up again before now, but quickly when I looked it up before, I think it does.
So those of you who are in Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia, a lot more strict control. If you're in Queensland and Victoria, they've got a lot more open policy on terms of off-label usage. You've got to demonstrate efficacy. Andy?
I'm just going to say that one of the products that we are able to use in New South Wales is Confidor. And that's available in like a pill form, which mixed with fertilizer. So it can be administered around the roots of the tree, and it has like a slow release. We've used it on Gemella, the Pandanus leafhopper, and also on blue moth and cycads.
Excellent. And yes, it's a neonicotinoid. So Confidor is the original neonicotinoid. It's a great chemical. It does have its detractors, and that's people that like European bee. And yes, always be aware of what you're going to do with off-target organisms whenever you're using a treatment. There always is going to be some side effect. It's a very hard balancing act. Arborists overall, and I know that I've said this to you before, Peter, arborists overall are generally less inclined to use chemicals than almost any other area of horticulture. And that's because we've got these big organisms. And Andy said, yes, you can use the tablets. Oddly enough, if you thought there were termites in the tree, you could treat it for termites by drenching it. And the off-label effect is you would control the weevil. And this is one of those weird things that what says on the label, and this is why I said look for things like horticultural or ornamental. Ornamentals are a really good common one to look for in the label. Label writers have tried to broaden their labels out a little bit, and that does give you a little bit more scope. But if you can't find it on the label in New South Wales, you're stuck by the rules. I know people break it. I know people break it regularly, Peter. I just can't endorse that in an environment like this, or in any other environment. I know it goes on. And he's right. I mean, it's odd. You can put imidacloprid tablets into the garden at the drop of a hat, and it's the same thing. You can treat fence posts with Confidor at the drop of a hat, but we have this then control, and there's some good reasons. One of them is we don't want to do things like make contaminating mistakes. So people that would use those chemicals would have to have a fair understanding. So termite control has some understanding of chemicals. The great thing about imidacloprid is it's bound with the soil very tightly, very quickly, so it doesn't move a lot. In the earlier days, we used to use things like metasistox, and use that as an injectant. And if you had a runoff to a creek line, you were talking about causing problems. And same, you had runoff down to the neighbour's veggie garden, you were causing problems. You had to be very aware. These new groups of chemicals have made life a lot better. So I think we've made improvements, but I think there's more to come. And the only other thing, Peter, is I know that Mortine outdoor barrier surface spray is approved for spraying on plants, and there's an equivalent one for mixing, but it's just an unworkable solution to your problem. Okay.
Yeah. No problem. And it just took me on a side tangent. You've mentioned injecting into PTLs before. How do you actually do it? Are you using a chemjet system, or how are you?
Yeah, a chemjet system will generally, if you drill enough of a hole, will get you into there. That's what we started to look at when I was in Hawaii. So I think that's a sensible approach to the problem. No point injecting into the roots because they're just inaccessible zone. I've seen injections into the stem of palms, but it's permanent, and I just can't endorse it. What I will tell you is hygiene is very important. So when you are these, and have a look at the Spanish pruning techniques where they leave the trunk the PDL almost smack to the peridome on the outside. Looks spectacular, very beautiful. You need very sharp chisel. It's made to prune palms. If you want to try one, I have one. I have two of them. You've got to be built like Arnold Schwarzenegger to use it. It certainly wore me out. But the cutting it short and keeping the PDLs sprayed with a surface spray when you do them is really important in just reducing the intake. They love freshly cut bases.
Yep.
So pruning, particularly in your area, is going to be a problem because you're east of Parramatta. We're seeing not so much west of Parramatta, but east of Parramatta. The temperature seems to be sufficiently moderate to allow for it. And when you're talking about urban areas, you can be talking about a heat sink area that's 3 or 4 degrees warmer than the reported temperature. So you end up with these problems. So I think we're going to end up with a whole pile of other similar sorts of tropical diseases down here over time. Of course, if you're up north, you've got it already, and huge things. So answer that one for you, Peter.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tell me if you have any luck with the APVMA in asking for an off-label permit. Last time I did it, I asked for a broad spectrum one. It took 2.5 years to get approved. That doesn't really work well.
No, need to act faster than that.
Someone sent me a tree of it had to be a Waterhousea floribunda, the tree of the decade. I think more Waterhouseas will be planted this decade than anything else. It's had a partial failure. I think we'd agree that's a fairly good one. You could swipe your credit card down all the way almost to the base. And it's almost hit ground level. Once it hits ground level, it can't go any further. Could you retain this tree? The answer is yes, of course you could. You'd need to at least at this stage put one bolt, I'd say, by the looks of it, an M10, a 10 mil bolt right through a pair of them. Try and offset them slightly. There's not a lot of trunk there. But
can you hold it there, Mark?
Yeah.
You go up that right, put your cursor up that right hand trunk, and yep, that branch there is starting to inoculate. Yeah. And natural bracing, and I was thinking about that this morning and thinking at some stage I really must do some field trials on making artificial natural braces. It's on its way.
Yes. Is this your one, Peter, as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great example of what trees are capable of dealing with. And again, I don't know if you remember, Peter, but we had a number of trees like this at the campus at Richmond.
Yep.
One in the driveway, two in the driveway, one in the university grounds that hadn't failed between 2001 when they were partially damaged by the microburst and what was that, 18 years later when I finally left at Richmond, still there. So it's not the end of the world. It really does take a lot. The one thing I do say is if the is all the way to the ground, once it hits the ground, there's not much more it can do. And there's a bit of an engineering issue here, and that is to fail at this point, we're going to make a Pythagorean tray. We're actually going to make it slightly longer so that crack to the base tends to stop it and it can go no further. and it can last like that for decades. So great video, thanks. But did you mind if I use it at some stage?
More than welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Next one. Is an unusual codominant stem. And I know what this is. This is really great. This goes to that same issue I was just talking about of making things. This is where the codominant stem started, and it's producing some adaptive growth as it goes up, and it's making that union quite good. It's a fairly strong union, even though it's codominant. This tissue here goes in every which way, and that length of that tissue means that trying to split that is essentially impossible. So this is a good response from the tree. And if I can show you what that looks like, and I believe I can, Google Photos. If I search for a partial failure, no, I'll search for tree anatomy. Get down to America. It would be quicker than this.
Mark, is that axillary growth or adaptive growth?
Yeah, look, these words are all interesting words. I call it adaptive growth now because that's where the general language is. It's just the tree responding to the stimulus. It's not modifying it, so we're not getting the secondary and primary cell walls changing, and therefore it's just more ordinary tissue. So adaptive growth is a perfectly fine term for that. Wow, I've got too many anatomy issues. And I will raise that in a few more minutes. Oh, how about I just do that as, I don't know whether I can do that. USA. Still going to have a whole pile of those. So yes, I've got the shots of the inside of one of those. I can't find it quickly, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. But what you actually find is at the lowest side of that image, I had tissue that had included bark. So the bark was stuck in the middle there, completely encapsulated. By the time I get to the top side, so I've got a cut 5 centimeters apart across one of these, you can see that the tissue is completely joined. There's no bark. The callus has been produced, and it's just producing a nice radius. So this is a strong attachment. Who sent that in? It was David, was it?
It was me again.
Ah, a wonderful shot, Peter.
Yeah.
And again,
First one of those I've seen.
Duncan Slater, you've seen one in class. There we are. Duncan Slater produced some interesting comments about this process of included junctions that I think often gets missed. And it's one that I raised in a report just this week. And that is, often we measure the strength of these or the adequacy of the strength by putting a couple of winches at either side and pulling the union and seeing how much wiggle it is. But that's artificial, because wind doesn't work that way. Wind works dynamically in the branches. So when I see something like that, well, in fact, I see any codominant stem now, unless I see active cracking or external signs of active cracking, I just ignore it. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them out there, and only a small percentage fail in any year. So I think worthwhile ignoring. So thanks for that, Peter. Great shot again. And Our next one. Okay, David sent this one. My question for the next mentor session is one that may have been discussed previously, but on commencement of a QTRA, a quantified tree risk assessment, of campgrounds along the shores of a lake, the governing authority has asked my opinion on the installation of warning signs. Trees may fall or branches may fall, warning signs. Look, there's no harm putting it up. That's the first one. You're often told that putting up signs means that you're admitting to there being an issue. There is an issue. NASA will tell you what the statistical likelihood of being hit by space junk is. And there's a large amount of it out there. And the figure's actually quite high. Let me just see if I can find that for you very quickly. Use Gemini. What does NASA say the likelihood of being hit by falling space junk is, and how frequently does space junk hit Australia? The likelihood of a person being hit is less than 1 in a trillion. Millions of times more likely to be struck by lightning. Space debris burns up before it hits. When pieces do survive, they almost land in the ocean or sparsely populated areas. So there is a distinct likelihood, small that it is, it's there. It's a real thing. Well, you know, we don't even think about it. So yes, tree branches fall. And my argument for not putting signs up is this. I would find it hard to imagine there's a person in Australia who has not seen or heard of a branch falling or a tree falling, and therefore they're aware of it regardless of how high that risk is. And now I've just alerted you to space debris. Do you think we should have caution? Space debris may fall in this spot everywhere in Australia? I don't think so. So I generally wouldn't put it up there, David, but there is no problems in putting that sign up there.
Okay.
In the case of Kew Gardens, when a young New Zealand girl was hit going back must be about 10 years ago now, the barristers for the plaintiff asked the same question, you know, should there be signs up? And my answer was, if you put signs up in any botanic gardens that said, look, be aware, branches might fall, how much do you think it would affect the impact on people being close up to the trees in that botanic gardens? What's your gut level feeling? Anybody? David?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't think anyone would take a damn of notice on a hot day. Now, at the moment, yesterday it was 36 degrees in the UK, and I guarantee you on that day, where if we're talking about it being summer branch drop rather than sudden branch drop, and there's questions as to which is what and whether there is, in fact, anything there at all. But do you think people are likely to spend less time under a tree on a hot day when the trees give shade? I suspect they're just as likely to be underneath. So I don't think it would alter behaviour. And I think that's the bit that if I was arguing it, that I would say that the plaintiff would need to prove. The plaintiff would need to prove that the signs would alter the behaviour of the party rather than not, because everyone I have ever spoken to knows that trees can have branches fail, that trees can fall over.
Mark, I think that there's an additional effect from having signs, and that is that it reinforces the idea that trees are dangerous, and encourages people to be scared of trees. And I think that's counterproductive.
I'd agree with you, Peter. It would be like having a sign up at every beach in Australia, caution, sharks use this area. You know, the risk of death from sharks is fairly small. The number of attacks is about the same as the number of deaths from trees. So that should be a really good thing, but there's a lot more trees and a lot more people spend time under trees than they do swimming in the water. So we could easily argue that sharks are more dangerous than trees. And I'd agree with you. I just don't see the point of it, because I think it's a mute sign, mute as in of little value, because it won't change behaviour. It doesn't change behaviour, then why am I bothering with it?
No. Well, that's the thing. Like in these campgrounds, they've got signs up everywhere about, collection of firewood, and spending 3 days out there assessing these campsites. Like the trees have just been hacked away. Like they just cut trees, they hack them, they hammer nails into them, they do whatever they like because there's no one around. So like it's about education, isn't it? Don't damage the trees. You've come to a pristine place to enjoy it, but I want to play lumberjack and hack into a tree with an axe because keeps the kids busy for half an hour, but you're damaging the trees. And it's the same with you put up a sign, don't camp under the tree. Well, how many languages do you need to put it in?
I think one thing that would be good to do is to let people that look after those sort of facilities or areas is to communicate that in the event of a thunderstorm, they should look for a space away from all trees, so an opening, and it might be good to identify such a spot in campgrounds where they can, that lets them understand. And that's just because of the issue of microbursts. And I know I showed a microburst video just a few weeks ago, I'm pretty sure this year, that just gives you an idea of how rapidly they can go from no wind to severe wind and cause problems. And that would account for, probably my guesstimate is, at least half of our campsite fatalities is there. The other one is red gums on rivers. And again, I think that's probably where just letting them know that, these trees can drop branches on fine days and in the middle of the night for no particular reason, is something that some of the European or overseas visitors may not be aware of. But I think most Australians have been told about river red gums dropping branches. But certainly, maybe not even a sign, just maybe something in the booking literature on the on-site. And you got your hand up about it.
Just that, like working for local government, I'd see signs often as just like an arse covering process. So not many people can probably notice the signs even. But if it comes to where someone is hurt by a falling branch, the litigant might say, "Oh, well, you should have been warning us." And if you can point at the sign and said, "Yeah, look up there, it's sign saying windy conditions, the branch might fall," and you chose to ignore that warning. And so, unfortunately, authorities will often use signs as just a means of covering their own asses.
Yeah, look, and I said, you don't need to have it all over the place, and you could do it just by having some booking information, David, that says, I've read that branches can fall, that during thunderstorms I should seek an opening away from the trees, or vacate that area for a temporary period of time. I think that can be done without making trees sound like bad omens. And again, the number of people that die from trees in Australia, very small number. Just
Sure.
I just don't know how we managed to get it as a significant concern as we have. It's just amazing.
Thank you.
But particularly when you look at the fact that we drive, that's just so, or cancer, things that are really serious. We seriously underestimate the risk. Okay, well, that's all the questions I've got. And we're already up to an hour and 45 minutes. An hour and 15 minutes. Has anyone got a question from the floor that they feel that they would like answered quickly rather than delayed?
It may not be a quick question, but just going back to the Strata Vaults there, which I am a fan of, but just playing devil's advocate, the cost on that one, Andy, you gave a $40,000 cost. Was that where the 2 Buckinghamias went in?
Correct. And it's probably gone up since I last saw the general ledger on that job. But yeah, it's hard to justify. Well, it's not hard to justify. I think it's very justifiable to be able to, create something that does have longevity, and it's going to promote good growth of the trees and get the full value of those trees for a long time to come.
I agree with you.
I
agree with you. I'm just, as I say, playing
I see too often.
Bit of devil's advocate. Just
I see too often, like if I work with engineers and they'll say to me, your green stuff's in the way of my black stuff. And I'll go and think, what's wrong with this tree? And we'll have a dig around. And we'll find they've basically just dug a couple of bucketfuls of soil out of the roadway and planted the bloody thing in road base, and it just struggles for the next 20 years. And I'm trying to show the people of Bangalore, like, yes, we're going to extreme with this, but we want to get it right. And so they will support us in our next movement, where we're going to dig up their road and take away some of the car parks, and we're going to inconvenience them, but at least they're going to be on our side.
Yeah, it definitely has its merits. I just wonder for a lot of places, for 40,000, how many trees you could plant that may not live all that long. So it really needs to be specific to a site, doesn't it? You may not get the longevity, but you could plant so many trees for $40,000.
Yeah, but you look at anything that like a council does, like putting in a big storm water pipe, will cost millions of dollars sometimes. So I'm seeing that going on all around me, and I guess I'm just sort of pushing ahead and thinking, well, no one stopped me spending this money yet, so let's see how it goes.
Yeah, look, I think you've got to balance it up in the equation, and I think there are benefits in using it. I think there are also some limitations. One of the things is it's an incredible cost. But there are areas of hard surface area, where what do we do? I think the deal has to come eventually where engineers and arborists communicate with each other in their same language. Peter, I think you found that paper. I sent it to you on, yes, we did, secondary thickening pressures associated with secondary thickening roots. Trying to get it to a level that engineers can understand, and they need to communicate stuff to us in a way we can understand. And I don't think we've got that well synergized yet. I see the advantages of it. I would have wanted to have put something bigger and faster growing than Andy's put it in. I'd have pushed the limits more, because liquid amber is a surface rooting species, so I expected the liquid amber to cause problems. I think you probably could have got away with something bigger. And the ones that I look at, Peter, is in the eastern suburbs of Sydney on the sandy loams, and you put figs in a 2 or 3 metre wide verge, and there's almost no root damage. And I find that just fascinating that, again, the soil type and the drainage rate has a huge influence. And so, you've got to look at it where you do it. You wouldn't do it in Bondi unless you had a completely sealed area where the soil had been so badly corrupted and ruined that replacing the material made sense. So it's not it's not a solution for all things. It's a solution in the right spot. And the other thing,
I think it'd be a really fascinating little bit of research to do a cost analysis on it, wouldn't it? If you planted 40 $1,000 trees, or two trees for $40,000,
okay, yes and no.
Yes.
Did you ever look at the St Mary's renewal?
No.
Okay.
St
Mary's went through and removed a whole pot of platinus, replaced them with Zelkovas. Don't ask me, it's just what they chose. That whole change has an impact on the environment, on the community. So there's something good about having longevity and having a sense of space to things. if you're replacing the trees, and there's been suggestions that the average street tree, and presumably in high urban areas, high use urban areas, lasts about 17 years. That's not a really good planting solution. You want big old trees. Now, a part of it is, and Andy alluded to it, is people can't look where they're going in Australia. They'll trip over a root. If that was Asia, and Peter will attest to this, Asians, they say they're short-sighted, but they can see where they're walking. They don't fall over and trip over. You see trips and slip hazards in Asia all the time, don't you, Peter?
Yep, sure do.
And yet
you see massive trees planted in really confined spaces, and they lift the footpath and they lift the road, and nobody cares. They'd rather have the tree.
So yeah, it's a weighing thing. I think part of it is our society. We've tried to change it. What we have happened in Australia, and it applies to what Andy's done, is and I know I think I mentioned this last meeting, but might not have. Hughes v. Hunters Hill. In Hughes v. Hunters Hill, dear Mrs. Hughes argues that a tree is not a natural structure, and under the Roads Act, because it's an artificial thing, it's considered to be the same as a road or a sign or anything else. And that changed what was previously a non-feasance issue with trees and the verge. You know, they were growing, no one knew that they were going to do it, so you weren't able to be, there wasn't a basis to seek compensation until you knew or should have reasonably known. That applies elsewhere. And you see that with the trees disputes between neighbours. Your trees knocked over my wall, but I didn't tell you. Well, sorry, that's all on you. Because I didn't know, and I couldn't have reasonably known that was happening. And that's the end of it. Whereas street trees are very different. So councils are in this nice, horrible little grey area that means they need to take more care than they might do elsewhere, like, for example, in a park and a path going through a park. The implications are two different things. If I trip over a lifted path in the street, the tree roots have lifted it, I should have known when I planted that street tree that that was going to happen. That's essentially what Hughes v. Hunters Hill says. But if I walk down the pathway between your property and mine, and I trip over, if I haven't told you, it's my tough luck. Make sense?
Yep.
So there are places. Having said that, I did a walk around of tree pits being used in Dallas, Fort Worth. I've now done it a couple of times. I went back and visited the trees again last year. And oddly enough, the most significant limiting factor wasn't the soil volume, it was moisture. Now, Dallas and Andy's end of the world aren't too dissimilar, except Dallas gets about a quarter of the rainfall that you get, Andy. And the trees that performed best weren't in the vaults. The trees that performed best were trees with hostas around them, and they performed best because people watered the hostas. And so water became the limiting factor there. And the structural soils aren't great at holding water. They're incredibly, and as a result, you can see this if you go to the Olympic Park, Sydney Olympic Park, the Ficus microcarpa hilii along the main avenue there were transplanted in. They're already reasonably big sized trees. They had to be barged down. They couldn't be road freighted. They've probably doubled in size in 25 years, which is just really slow growth for ficus. But that's, again, because of the limiting factors that come with these. I think what Andy's selected in terms of plant material for a structurally altered soil is probably a smart solution. And you'll probably get 50 to 100 years out of it, which is a nice outcome when you think about it. And often we don't realize that these, what we call small trees, aren't small, they're slow growing. And so, you know, it's one of those things when you finally go out and see a lagostromia with a trunk on it that's, 50 centimeters in diameter, and you think, it's not a small tree. Or my favorite one's Buxus sempervirens at 15 meters in height. You think, Yeah, okay, it is big. Took 200 years to get there, but it's big. And that's one of the things that we have problems with as professionals is we use big and small tree rather than slow growing, fast growing. There's one thing I'd like to see in the nursery trade change is it's the speed that it's going to grow at. You know, when Fraxinus griffithii came out, evergreen ash, you know, it's a small tree. Well, Peter, you've seen them with Peter Hannigan, you've seen them with me out at University of Western Sydney on the back roads there at 15 metres in height already. They're not small, they're just slower growing, probably half the rate at, well, quarter of the rate of something like Crimbia maculata, which is faster growing. And so people think that trees, the average population think that trees have a terminal height and then they stop. They don't. There's a curve at which they grow slower and you can graph that for them, but essentially they just keep on getting longer and longer and taller until they die. Whereas we get to 45, David, I see you're hitting there now, 45, and then you start to shrink. It's really unfair. You get shorter and shorter and it compresses down and you get fatter and fatter. So trees are a little bit like that, except they get taller and 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 taller until they start to retrench themselves. And so that's what gives us our extra super big trees, our, you know, biggest specimen tree of whatever sort we have. Happy with that? So when nurseries start talking about slow growing, less than 200 mils a year, fast growing, 500, very fast growing, 1 metre a year, you know, that sort of breakdown, I think it'll communicate to people a little bit better. The one I see most commonly, and I'm sure all of you have, is that I got Cupressus, Crossesposa pyrus, Leighton's green hedge, and they only grow to 6 metres. Now, they only grow to 6 metres in 6 years. And in 20 years, that should be sitting at about 15 metres in height. And at 40 years, it should be sitting at about 20, 25 metres in height. And boy, you really don't have room for a 70-metre high hedgerow there. You know, whereas they've been convinced that 6 metres is the height because the label says 2 6 metres rather than saying 6 metres in the first 6 years. Okay. Now, Peter.
All good.
Because we're nice and organised, I can tell you when our next meeting is.
14th of July.
Thank you, Peter. 14th of July, and my understanding is that's a Tuesday. So I'll see you guys on the 14th of July. Again, send things in, things that are of interest. I'm not going to often sit down and spend 2 or 3 hours trying to solve a disease problem for you. Sean just got my curiosity. I'd never seen anything like it before. So I mentally wanted to solve it, and I think we were there. Again, you could go and experiment with it, Sean. Go buy yourself a dozen Araucarias and try testing. My guess is dicamba, and see how you go with it.